She shouldn't be standing on those steps. Liability's not on me if she's clumsy.
That's what Alden Trask, Vice President of the Renmore Bluffs HOA, muttered when Mira gasped and staggered forward, his hand still midair from where it had just pushed her lower back. There wasn't a warning sign on the landing, no tape, no railing where the tile had cracked loose. Just Mira, my wife, 7 months pregnant, falling hard down 5 concrete steps before anyone could react. Alden didn't even move. He stood there in his linen shirt and HOA badge, arms folded like this was just another Wednesday. I looked up at him from where I was kneeling, one hand gripping Mira's elbow, the other already dialing 911. "You touched her?" I said. "You pushed her." He scoffed. "You want to start something, Mr. Lawyer? We've got rules about interfering during HOA-sponsored events. Maybe your wife shouldn't be so fragile." What I didn't tell him, not yet, was this. The moment Mira hit the ground, he opened a legal door he couldn't close. And unfortunately for Alden, I don't just know the law. I teach it, I litigate it, and I've built an entire career around one thing: premises liability. If you're in an HOA and think that could never happen to your family, think again. This is how fast it spirals. You might want to follow now. I'm going to show you exactly how we took him down. Name's Corwin Dresner, 42 years old, personal injury attorney. No billboards, no radio ads. I don't chase clients. I wait for cases like this. Because when someone causes harm and hides behind their title, that's not an accident, that's a strategy. Renmore Bluffs was supposed to be a fresh start. We moved here after Mira's second miscarriage, thinking the hilltop air and quiet streets might finally bring peace. I remember when she first saw the view from the clubhouse. She smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. The structure she fell from? She'd joked she wanted to take our maternity photos there. She didn't see the cracks in the tile, the missing anchor bolts, the erosion under the landing. But I did. I'd mentioned it in passing to Alden weeks ago, after I noticed a couple of kids nearly tumble down it during a holiday event. He brushed it off. "It's a decorative staircase," he'd said, "not technically a primary access point." Translation: not his problem, not unless someone got hurt. Mira was hurt, not just bruises and scrapes. There was bleeding. She clutched her belly on the 3rd step down, her face pale, voice trembling. She didn't cry. She just looked up at me and said, "Did he push me?" She didn't ask if the baby was okay. She asked that. And that's when I realized Alden wasn't just negligent, he was dangerous. Because a man like that, who watches a pregnant woman fall and checks his policy, maintain flow before checking her pulse, is a man who assumes immunity from law, from consequence, from human decency. He doesn't know what kind of war he just walked into. The ambulance arrived 8 minutes later. Mira was stable, no contractions. The baby's heartbeat was strong, but they took her anyway. Precautionary monitoring, the paramedic said. I didn't ride with her. I couldn't. Because I was already walking back up those cracked steps, measuring tread width with my phone, voice recording timestamps, and documenting loose mortar. My hands shook, not from fear, from restraint. Alden stood at the top, watching me, holding a clipboard now, like it gave him authority. Like he thought this was going to end with another strongly worded email. He doesn't know the insurance code violations I just recorded. He doesn't know that if I can prove gross negligence by the board, Renmore Bluffs insurer could freeze the HOA's entire liability coverage. He doesn't know I've won cases with less, but he'll find out. He'll find out when every homeowner here realizes that if their board loses coverage, they become financially liable. He'll find out when neighbors stop protecting him and start protecting themselves. He'll find out that the man he thought was just some quiet guy with a mailbox complaint is the one person he should have never touched, especially not his wife. The morning after the fall, Mira's hospital wristband still pressed a pale groove into her skin. She was asleep on the living room couch, wrapped in the same cardigan she wore to the HOA event, now stained on the sleeve with dried blood and pine mulch. I sat on the porch, sipping black coffee I couldn't taste, staring at the crumpled HOA citation Alden had left us. Disruptive conduct during board-sponsored community event. No explanation, no apology, just a checkbox marked in smug blue ink and a line for resident signature left blank. My mailbox still rattled in the breeze from where it hadn't been properly secured after their beautification campaign. A project Alden had overseen himself, contracting his cousin's landscaping crew without even posting a vote. It wasn't just us. I'd seen the pattern since the day we moved in. A painted bench too close to the sidewalk, removed without notice. An elderly woman fined for a hummingbird feeder. A family forced to take down a children's swing set they had installed in their own backyard, all under the same pretense: violation of community standards. Standards no one seemed to have access to. Standards that changed with Alden's mood, and yet no one challenged him. Why? Because most people just wanted to keep their heads down. Because it's easier to grumble behind closed doors than risk retaliation. Because the fines were small, the warnings quiet, the penalties administrative, until they weren't. Until someone like Mira ended up in the emergency room. The community email thread pinged around 10:30 a.m., a message from the board titled "Clarification on last night's incident." It was brief, cold. It read, "At the CGG October social gathering, an unfortunate slip occurred on the Bluffside stairwell. No visible hazards were identified at the scene. Residents are reminded to use caution when navigating sloped walkways. As always, please consult the HOA handbook regarding appropriate footwear and ramp access." Appropriate footwear? Mira had been wearing orthopedic flats. I clicked reply. I typed a single line. "You shut down the ramp, remember?" Then I deleted it. Not because it wasn't true, but because I had no intention of arguing with a mob that only understood leverage. I'd spent years in deposition rooms watching insurance defense teams twist facts into pretzels. You don't shout into their storm. You anchor them with evidence until the weight of their lies snaps their own structure. But I needed more than my testimony. I needed patterns. I pulled up my violation folder, a habit I'd started after our third citation. Photos, timestamps, PDFs. I documented everything, from the tree trimming warning in July to the letter about Mira's car not being community aesthetic compliant because of a non-neutral windshield sunshade. The HOA claimed to be democratic, but we hadn't seen a ballot since move-in. Alden called emergency votes over email at off hours, scheduled board meetings in conflict with community events, and rewrote policy language in addendum memos that were never posted in full. I opened a spreadsheet I'd labeled Exposure Map, Column A, Resident Names, Column B, Infraction Type, Column C, Date, Column D, Repeat Frequency, Column E, Retaliation Escalation. It wasn't just about my wife. That fall wasn't an isolated event, it was an endpoint, the result of unchecked negligence, hushed warnings, and policies written to protect the board, not the people they were supposed to represent. Mira stirred on the couch. She blinked awake slowly, lips dry, eyes already scanning for pain. "Anything from the doctor?" I asked softly. "Some bruising," she whispered. "I'm okay." But her voice broke on the word okay, and I knew she was lying, for my sake. I kissed her forehead and walked back out to the porch just as a delivery truck pulled up. A plain manila envelope with no return address dropped into my mailbox. I opened it, expecting another citation. Instead, it was a screenshot, an email. Subject: Maintenance Risk, Bluffside Stair Rail. Sent from Daphne.cord.ailey, renmorehoa.net. The message was addressed to Alden. It was dated 2 months ago. Per our conversation, the entry path handrail has visible rust and wobble. Multiple residents have tripped on the final step. I strongly recommend we tape off the area and approve the repair estimate from K Marsh Construction. Liability risk increasing daily. At the bottom, Alden's reply: "Let it sit. No one's going to fall unless they're clumsy." I folded the paper slowly and leaned back in my chair. The real story hadn't started with Mira's fall. It started with a warning Alden ignored. Daphne Cordale wasn't at the HOA mixer the night Mira fell. That was by design. She hadn't been attending in person for the last few months, just quietly submitting minutes, signing off on meeting summaries, and rubber stamping Alden's decisions like the rest of the board. Only she did it from behind her screen, camera off, microphone muted. The kind of fear you start to notice once you've been around long enough to see patterns forming beneath the paperwork. But today, I saw her in person for the first time since Mira's fall. The emergency board meeting was held in the small community room behind the Renmore leasing office, technically open to all residents, though they rarely advertised that fact. A folding table stretched the length of the room, lined with mismatched chairs and coffee-stained HOA banners. The board sat in a line like judges. Only Alden stood, controlling the narrative. "Let's move quickly through this," he said, tapping a stack of prepared bullet points. "We're addressing community concern over the incident at the steps. As stated, it was a regrettable accident, not the result of board action or inaction." I stood at the back wall with my arms crossed, letting him hang himself with every word. That's when I saw her. Daphne was seated 2 chairs down from Alden. Her blouse was neatly pressed, her hair pulled back. She held a pen in her right hand, and though she wasn't writing anything, her fingers kept twitching like she meant to. Every time Alden said unforeseeable or no known hazards, I watched her flinch. Her eyes darted toward the audience once. She saw me. I nodded. Her mouth opened like she might say something, but then Alden shifted beside her, and she dropped her gaze back to her notes. The rest of the board barely spoke. One nodded at the floor, another scrolled through her phone. The minutes passed like fog. Then Alden said it. "I've spoken with our liability advisor. There's no basis for a claim against the HOA. It's been handled." Mira hadn't even finished her 3rd physical therapy session. I took a step forward and spoke calmly. "On what grounds was that conclusion made?" Alden blinked. "I'm sorry?" "You said the HOA's liability advisor reviewed it. Who provided the assessment? Was a site inspection conducted?" "I'm not at liberty to share third-party communications." He snapped too quickly. "That would violate the privacy of board operations." I tilted my head. "You mean HOA operations, which are governed by shared ownership, not corporate privilege." Somewhere in the room, a chair creaked. No one defended him. I glanced at Daphne again. Her hand was now clutching her pen hard enough to bend it. She wasn't scribbling notes. She was fighting herself. "Are we done?" Alden said, pretending to shuffle papers. "We've answered the concern." But no motion was called. No vote taken. Just a desperate attempt to move on. I let it play out. Let the non-response become uncomfortable. When the meeting ended, the room emptied in pairs and whispers. I stayed behind. Daphne lingered near the window, pretending to read the bulletin board. I stepped up beside her. "I got your message," I said. Her shoulders tensed, but she didn't turn. "I didn't send it," she said softly. "But you wrote it." She hesitated, then nodded once. "It wasn't supposed to go like that. I flagged the landing twice. He told me if I kept pushing, I'd lose my seat." "Was that before or after he shut down the ramp access?" "Same week." I studied her face. Guilt sat just under the surface, coiled like a wire ready to snap. "Daphne, if this escalates and the insurer investigates, they'll ask who knew what and when. If you stay silent now, you won't be a witness. You'll be a participant." She turned finally, her voice dropped to a whisper. "You think I don't know that?" I didn't respond. I didn't have to. She looked down, fingers fidgeting again. "He has a way of making you feel like resistance is disloyalty. Like the only thing worse than being wrong is being the reason he doesn't win." I gave her time. Then I left. Outside, the sun had dropped low over the bluff, casting long shadows across the cracked concrete walkway leading back to the clubhouse stairs. The same ones they hadn't taped off. Not yet. But they would. 2 days later, a letter appeared in our mailbox. It wasn't certified, no envelope. Just folded and sealed with an HOA stamp like a proud brand on livestock. The heading read, "Incident Notice, Safety Guidelines Reminder." I unfolded it on the kitchen counter while Mira adjusted the heating pad against her side. It said Mira had chosen to use the front structure during an ongoing landscape renovation, and that residents were expected to adhere to posted safety suggestions as outlined in Section 8A of the HOA Handbook. Section 8A? We hadn't seen any signage, no posted closure, no warning at all. And then the line that made my jaw lock. While the HOA expresses regret for any distress, no actionable hazard was present at the time of the event. No hazard, no tape, no signage, no accountability. Mira glanced up at me from the couch. "They're pretending it didn't happen." "They're pretending it was our fault," I said. It was mid-afternoon when I returned to the steps, walking alone, hoodie up, clipboard in hand. Not for theatrics, for the inspection checklist I'd used for years while working private legal cases. The HOA might have ignored their own standards, but they couldn't ignore the municipal building codes I was trained to cite by line and subsection. The bluffside landing curved down from the clubhouse like a statement piece, symmetrical, visually impressive, entirely useless in bad weather. It was made of poured concrete, slabs set in brick trim, flanked by wrought iron railings that had been painted over so many times you couldn't tell where the rust began. I knelt beside the step where Mira's foot had caught. The tile was still cracked, half lifted at the edge, a perfect trap for a thin-soled shoe. The handrail above it wobbled under one-finger pressure. When I looked closer, I saw it. The bolts underneath weren't rusted. They were loose. Someone had done a lazy reinstallation, probably during Alden's cousin's landscaping update. I snapped photos from multiple angles, detail shots, wide shots, time-stamped with my inspection app. A landscaper across the lawn gave me a long glance. I nodded. He looked away, probably not his first time seeing a resident gather ammo. I stood at the top of the entry path, staring down toward the path where Mira had fallen. For a moment, the sunlight sharpened every crack, every missing brick, every place where cosmetic upgrades had covered structural decay. The HOA had spent tens of thousands on rose trellises, but nothing on the path people actually used. And now they were trying to call it an accident. Worse, they were trying to shift the blame. I opened my email and pulled up the HOA's digital archive. The board meeting notes from the last quarter had quietly been updated, backdated too. The only mention of the landing repair was a vague line. Pending review, alternate routing options available. Alternate routing. Mira never had a choice. That night, while Mira slept, I stayed up and drafted the beginning of what would become the first exhibit in a liability dossier. I titled it simply, Unsafe Premises Pattern Recognition, Renmore HOA. Below it, I laid out 3 columns, known hazards, reported concerns, action taken. In the reported concerns row for the Bluffside steps, I added a direct quote from Daphne's email, liability risk increasing daily. Then I made a new column, willful inaction, a term I knew insurance adjusters hated more than fraud. In the legal world, willful inaction means a problem wasn't just overlooked, it was known, documented, and consciously ignored. It opens a crack in coverage wider than any broken step. If I could show Alden and the board had knowledge and chose to do nothing, that would classify the incident as gross negligence. And gross negligence? That's the difference between an HOA protected by insurance and one where every single homeowner is personally liable. I wasn't ready to pull that trigger yet, not without more, but now I had what I needed to aim. The footage came unexpectedly, tucked between small talk and casserole. Mira and I had been invited over by Julia Brendel, our neighbor 3 houses down. She was one of the few who still waved when passing by, the kind who delivered welcome cookies without a nameplate. She'd left a note on our porch, come by any time, no board talk I promise, just soup and omission if you need it. We needed both. Mira was stiff but mobile, her arm in a soft sling now. She smiled through the evening like she wasn't still waking up from nightmares of her body hitting cold stone. Julia kept conversation light. Garden updates, a new pasta sauce recipe, something about a raccoon war with her compost bin. But as the meal ended and Mira excused herself to rest, Julia stood up and walked to the counter without saying a word. She opened her laptop. I didn't want to assume, she said, but my Ring camera caught part of what happened. My spine straightened. I wasn't sure what to do with it, but if it were me, I'd want to know. She turned the screen toward me. The video began with cheerful background noise, clinking glasses from the clubhouse, voices, someone adjusting a microphone. The camera faced the side angle of the stairwell, aimed across the sidewalk from Julia's front yard. It was distant, grainy, but clear enough. I saw Mira's hand reach for the rail. I saw Alden step behind her. He didn't shove her, not violently, not obviously. But he placed his hand on the small of her back, and he pushed. Subtle. Like nudging someone through a door they already meant to walk through. But Mira wasn't walking, she was bracing, and the moment his hand made contact, her foot shifted and caught the raised tile. Her body pitched forward. The rest I already knew. I watched myself run into the frame. I watched her fall again, only this time from 10 feet away. Her stomach turned inward, arms scrambling. My own voice echoed faintly in the background, yelling for someone to call 911. When the screen went black, I sat there without breathing. "He said she just fell," Julia whispered. "He made it sound like it was her mistake." "He will keep saying that," I said, "unless we stop him." She hesitated. "Do you need the file?" I looked her in the eye. "Julia, this might be the most important 5 seconds of video ever recorded in Renmore." She didn't blink. She just slid over a thumb drive. "Already saved it. Multiple copies." I nodded and slipped it into my coat pocket. Back home, I uploaded the footage immediately. 3 secure backups, metadata intact, time-stamped, and chained to a digital affidavit template I'd used countless times. I embedded it into my growing dossier beneath a bold new header: Direct Evidence, Physical Contact, Preceding Fall. I watched it twice more, not because I needed to, but because I had to burn it into memory. The slight lean of Alden's shoulder, the casual placement of his hand, the indifference in his posture as Mira collapsed just feet from a stone planter that could have crushed her skull. There was no more unfortunate accident to hide behind. No more plausible deniability. Not now. This was contact. This was preventable. This was liability. And for an HOA board operating under a residential general liability policy, that made it nuclear. I pulled out Mira's file of HOA violations and laid them beside the footage notes. The timeline was clean, predictable. They'd cited us 5 times in the past 2 months, twice for minor decor, once for her car's windshield shade, and twice for vague yard compliance. No warnings about entry path usage, no closure notices, no ramp accessibility memos. If they claimed we had been told to avoid the stairs, they'd need proof. If they claimed Mira acted recklessly, the footage would destroy that. And if they tried to say Alden never touched her, they'd lose more than credibility. They'd forfeit protection. The policy I'd reviewed during my time consulting with Coraline Underwriting Group had specific clauses about gross negligence and bodily injury resulting from knowingly unaddressed physical hazards. Add in a board member's direct contact, and it moved into breach territory. That's when insurance stops shielding the HOA and starts asking homeowners to foot the legal bill. I leaned back and exhaled. The trap hadn't sprung yet. But now it had teeth. Mira stood at the bathroom sink, brushing her teeth with her left hand, the sling cradling her right shoulder like a broken wing. She caught me watching her in the mirror. "I'm not made of glass," she said softly. I didn't answer. I just stepped forward and wrapped my arms around her waist, careful of every angle. She leaned into me, resting her head back against my chest. "You're building something. I can feel it." "I have everything I need," I said. "But I'm not doing this out of spite." "I know," she said. "You're doing it because you have to, because no one else will." Her voice caught slightly and then she pulled away. "Just make sure you finish it." I did finish it, at least the part that mattered most. The liability packet was now 63 pages long, organized, time-stamped, cataloged. It included the ring footage, the photos of the handrail, the documented violation timeline, the board meeting notes, and the printed copy of Daphne's warning email. And now, on page 1, I had a cover letter to Policy Administrator, Municipal Risk Liability Division. Subject: premises liability exposure and notice of gross negligence. I wasn't filing a lawsuit yet. That wasn't the goal. I was filing what's known as a preservation of evidence and exposure notification letter. It's the kind of letter that doesn't demand money, doesn't accuse directly, but puts every insured party on notice that litigation could occur, and that if they alter, destroy, or fail to produce evidence, they'll be in breach of duty. It's a legal tripwire. If they respond, they admit there's something worth preserving. If they ignore it, they open the door to sanctions if this goes to trial. If they notify the HOA board, which they will, the board knows the policy is under scrutiny, and the second that policy looks compromised, every homeowner under that umbrella starts panicking, because they're all equally liable for board decisions made on their behalf. I printed the letter, signed it, mailed 2 copies, one certified to the insurer, one to the HOA's legal address. Then I emailed a digital copy to the board, alias. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't need one. This wasn't about them anymore. It was about pressure. 2 hours later, I received a read receipt from the board email address. 3 hours after that, I received a knock on the door. I opened it to find Alden on my front step, red-faced, jacket unbuttoned, a folder clutched in his hand like a shield. "We need to talk," he said. "No, we don't," I replied. "You sent a letter to the insurer. That's wildly inappropriate. You're not even a plaintiff. Yet." He exhaled sharply. "Corwin, this could affect the entire community. You're putting innocent people at risk." I raised an eyebrow. Innocent people didn't shove my pregnant wife down compromised infrastructure steps, and innocent people didn't ignore repair requests. "You don't have proof of that," he snapped. "Actually," I said, "I have 3 forms of proof. You just haven't seen all of them yet." He blinked. I watched the moment he realized I wasn't bluffing. "We can work this out," he said, voice lowering. Quietly, "You don't want to be the guy who tanks property values over a misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding, Alden. You understood exactly what you were doing when you told Daphne to let it sit." His lips parted, then shut. I stepped forward. "This isn't a negotiation. It's a warning. You've got 24 hours to call a public board meeting and announce a structure closure and liability investigation. If you don't, I'll submit the full report to every homeowner in Renmore and explain what personal financial exposure means under the terms of your policy." He didn't respond. He just stared at me for a long second, then turned and walked down the path, his steps stiff, uneven, like the concrete beneath him might crack at any moment. And maybe it would. Back inside, Mira was reading on the couch. She looked up, eyebrows raised. "Was that him?" "It was," I said. She watched me set down the folder. "Did he apologize?" "No," I said. But I didn't ask him to, because I wasn't looking for an apology. I was looking for leverage. The manila envelope was heavier than I expected. No return address, no markings except one corner bent from whoever slid it under my door. Inside were 5 printed pages. The first was a cover sheet. No salutation, no name. Just one line typed in 12-point font. "You were right. These never made it into the official minutes." I knew who had sent it before I even read the rest. The second page was a forwarded internal email chain between Daphne Cordell and Alden Trask. Dated. 3 weeks before Mira's fall. The subject line, "Pending repairs, Bluffside Landing." Her email was measured, professional. Following up on my earlier memo, several residents have commented on the instability of the southeast steps. Handrail still loose, final step cracked. Requesting board vote to approve repair funds already set aside from Q2 budget. Alden's reply, blunt and dismissive. "We don't need to scare people with another temporary closure sign. Just get through the mixer weekend. Optics matter more right now." The third page was a private note from Daphne to another board member, Marisol Tran, flagging her concern that Alden was deliberately avoiding maintenance votes. She included language suggesting she felt pressured to stay silent and that she feared reprisal for contradicting the narrative. The final 2 pages? An unapproved draft of last quarter's meeting minutes, complete with highlighted edits. The original version listed, Item 3, Safety Review, Bluffside Entry Path to be evaluated post-event. But that line was crossed out, replaced with, Structure approved for use. I spread the papers across my desk like a prosecutor about to make closing arguments. They weren't just pieces of evidence, they were proof of intent, the one thing insurance companies fear more than injury claims. Negligence is bad. Gross negligence is worse. But knowing something is dangerous, choosing not to act, and then altering the record to cover your tracks, that's how you get policies dropped mid-claim. That's how you get boards sued into personal debt. I picked up my phone and texted one word to the number Daphne had used the day she slipped that screenshot into my mailbox. Received. No response came, but I didn't need one. The fact that she'd sent it at all meant her internal war was over. She'd picked a side. I called my old colleague at the underwriting agency next, Elliot Keene. We hadn't worked together in 5 years, but I still had his number under a tab labeled Call When It Matters. "Corwin," he answered on the second ring. "I heard about Renmore. You in it?" "I'm past in it. I'm at the bottom of it, and it's about to break open." "Send it all over," he said. "I'll have compliance review it in-house first. If the policy exclusions line up with what you're saying, their coverage could be frozen while we investigate. How long would that take?" If the board's been altering internal documentation and ignoring a known safety hazard. He exhaled. 3 days, maybe less. I sent the packet. Full documentation, labeled, chronological, bulletproof. I didn't smile when it was done. I didn't feel triumph, just a settling in my chest, like the last stone locking into a foundation. That evening I walked the long way around the block, past the now infamous stairwell, still unmarked, still open. I paused halfway down the sidewalk, took out my phone, and snapped one more photo, just to mark the date. When I turned the corner, I saw Daphne sitting alone on her porch. She was sipping something from a mug, legs tucked beneath her, eyes glassy but calm. I raised my hand. She raised hers in return. It was the first time I'd seen her in public without flinching. No words were exchanged. None were needed. She had done her part. The board didn't know it yet, but the damage wasn't just financial anymore. It was structural, internal, and it had started from within. The insurance reply came faster than I expected. Less than 48 hours after I'd sent the packet, I received a call from an unknown number. The man's voice was clipped and professional. "This is Darren Wolf, Senior Risk Analyst for Municipal Shield. I'm reaching out in reference to your submitted exposure notification regarding Renmore Bluffs HOA." I stayed quiet, letting him lead. "We've reviewed the initial documentation," he continued. "Our underwriters have identified sufficient cause to initiate a preliminary freeze on liability processing pending further internal review, effective immediately." It was the phrase I'd been waiting for. A freeze, not a denial, not a cancellation, but a halt, a financial red light that would send the entire board into panic mode. "We've also informed the board of their obligation to respond to all inquiries and preserve communication records," Wolf added. "Any attempt to delete or alter digital documents during this process will result in immediate referral to the Department of Insurance." "Understood," I said, "and thank you." He didn't thank me back. He wasn't on my side. But the system worked how it worked, and I knew exactly how to use it. By that evening, I had confirmation that the board had received the freeze notice. Someone, likely Marisol, forwarded me the exact wording, along with a single sentence typed below. "They're calling an emergency session, 6 p.m. tomorrow, Clubhouse." Perfect. But I wasn't done. It wasn't enough to freeze the board. I had to turn the homeowners. I had to make sure the residents of Renmore understood exactly what the phrase liability freeze meant. So I printed 30 copies of a 2-page flyer and delivered each one by hand. Title: What the Board Won't Tell You. How the HOA's insurance freeze affects you personally. I kept the language sharp but simple, enough to scare, not confuse. I explained how homeowner associations pool liability through collective ownership. If the insurance provider withdraws coverage or refuses to defend claims, each homeowner becomes personally liable for any successful legal judgment, including medical damages. I explained that Alden had knowingly ignored maintenance requests. I explained that the HOA's own secretary had documented the risk. I explained that I wasn't asking for money. I wasn't suing yet. But if it came to that, they would all be named in the suit because that's how the structure worked. By the time I reached the third cul-de-sac, word had already spread. 2 homeowners stopped me on the sidewalk. One looked furious. The other looked afraid. "Are you saying we're not covered right now?" one asked. "No," I said. "I'm saying you're frozen. That means if someone else falls tomorrow, the board has no active defense coverage, and if the board gets sued, you're the board." Their faces fell. Back home, I hung the last copy of the flyer on the bulletin board outside the clubhouse, right beneath the neatly pinned fall social announcement and the pumpkin carving flyer Alden had posted that morning. It was the same board he'd used to ignore every repair request for the past year. Now it held something else, a ticking clock. I returned home and updated my case log. I time-stamped the flyer distribution and labeled it Phase 2, Pressure Campaign. I didn't use the word revenge. That wasn't what this was. This was accountability. At dinner, Mira barely touched her food. She watched me from across the table, eyes tracing the fatigue in my shoulders. "You don't have to carry all of this," she said. "Yes, I do," I replied, "because I'm the only one who can carry it legally, the only one who knows where the holes are." She reached across and laid her hand over mine. "Then just promise me one thing," she whispered. "When it's over, stop digging." I gave her a tired smile. "When it's over, I'll fill it in with concrete myself." That night, the emails started rolling in, not from the board, from residents, one after another. Can we talk before the meeting? What do you need us to do? He's done this before. I didn't say anything then. I want to now. By midnight, I had 13 names, 13 voices, and one HOA president about to be buried under the weight of his own inaction. The clubhouse smelled like citrus cleaner and panic. I stepped through the glass doors 5 minutes before the emergency meeting and watched the board scramble behind the folding table like stage actors whose script had been yanked mid-performance. Alden's face was stone. Marisol looked like she hadn't slept in 2 days. Daphne sat silently at the far end, tapping her pen once, twice, then not at all. Chairs filled up fast. Most meetings drew maybe 6 residents. Tonight, there were nearly 40. I spotted familiar faces: Julia, the Warners from Maple Circle, even the couple Alden fined for a wheelchair ramp 2 years ago. They hadn't shown their faces since the citation. Now they were in the front row. Alden stood and adjusted the collar of his blazer. We'll begin shortly. This is a closed meeting for HOA members only. We are HOA members, someone muttered from the back. Alden ignored it. I found an open seat by the wall, unzipped my bag, and pulled out a single packet, labeled, tabbed, tidy. He started the meeting with a stalling tactic: financial updates, landscaping revisions, a motion to approve a new holiday decor policy. No one cared. Finally, Marisol cleared her throat. We should move to the liability discussion. Alden shot her a glare. We haven't confirmed whether that item's valid for general discussion. Daphne spoke without looking up. It's on the agenda. You sent it. He blinked. She didn't flinch. Marisol nodded and turned to the room. As many of you know, the HOA has received notice from our insurance provider, placing a temporary freeze on liability coverage. This is a procedural measure pending a review of incident handling and safety documentation. Whispers broke out instantly. Alden raised both hands. To be clear, there is no lawsuit, and the board is taking all necessary steps to resolve the insurer's questions. That was my cue. I stood up, walked to the front, and placed my binder on the table with a soft thunk. I'll clarify, I said. There is no lawsuit yet, but your insurer is responding to credible documentation of gross negligence involving a known hazard, documented in multiple emails, unaddressed by the board, which resulted in physical injury to a resident, my wife. Marisol looked at the packet. Is that the packet you submitted? No, I said. That's the one I'm distributing to the homeowners tomorrow. Alden stood. You're weaponizing fear. That packet isn't certified. It's just your opinion. I opened the documentation and slid a page toward him. This is your email, Alden. The one where you told your secretary not to post closure signs because optics matter more right now. His eyes dropped to the page, then jumped to Daphne. She didn't look away this time. I didn't leak it, she said. I preserved it. There's a difference. Murmurs turned to sharp voices. Someone stood. You told us there were no issues with the stairs. You said it was just bad footing. Alden's voice cracked. There's no proof of any direct action. I clicked the remote in my hand. A projector screen behind the board flickered to life. Julia's ring footage played, silent and devastating. Mira reaching, Alden's hand, the fall. The room went still. I let it run twice. Then I clicked it off. If the board does not hold a formal vote to suspend Alden Trask from all active roles pending the insurer's review, I said, turning back to the room, I'll file a civil liability claim, not just against the HOA, but against each individual board member for breach of fiduciary duty under California Civil Code 5800. Alden's mouth opened, then closed. Marisol reached for the motion list. I move that we suspend Alden Trask immediately and form an emergency audit subcommittee. Daphne raised her hand. Seconded. They didn't even wait to count the votes. The silence was its own tally. Alden didn't return to his seat. After the vote, he stood behind the table for a full minute, arms hanging at his sides like they'd forgotten how to move. When Marisol asked if he wanted to make a statement for the minutes, he shook his head once, slow, stunned, and walked out without a word. The door clicked shut behind him, quieter than anyone expected. No one clapped, no one cheered. The room simply exhaled. Daphne was the first to speak. We'll need to schedule a full audit of all repair deferrals, budget reallocations, and emergency fund dispersals. I'll begin by recovering the unaltered board minutes from our cloud storage, the ones Alden had me overwrite. Her voice was steady now. Julia stood. "What about the steps? It's still open." "We'll shut it down tonight," Marisol replied. "Tape and signage until a proper crew inspects it. I'll call Marsh Construction myself." I watched all of it quietly. Not because I was finished, but because I wasn't needed anymore. That night, Mira and I stood at the edge of the bluffside landing. The moon hung low, silver against the tile cracks that still caught every light like broken glass. A strip of yellow caution tape now flapped between the railings. Someone had planted orange cones along the bottom step. I took a photo. Mira leaned gently on my arm. "Feels strange," she said. "Like it knows." "It does," I said. "Stairs remember things." She looked up at me, amused. "You're getting poetic." "I'm allowed one metaphor. After that, I go back to legal briefs and blunt instruments." She smiled, but her eyes were tired. "So, what happens now?" "Now," I said, "we clean up." I spent the next week helping draft the formal HOA resolution for Alden's removal. I made sure it was worded cleanly, free of inflammatory language, legally precise. The homeowners deserved something final, not another bureaucratic echo. Then came the repairs. Marsh Construction arrived with drills, jackhammers, caution tape, and the kind of professionalism the community hadn't seen since before Alden took control. They tore up the structure down to the foundation, revealing corroded anchors and waterlogged substructure. More than one resident stopped by just to stare, some in awe, some in guilt. Daphne brought me a flash drive during one of the audit sessions. "You should have this," she said. "It's every version of the meeting minutes, even the ones Alden deleted. I pulled them from the version history." I took it, but I didn't open it. "You ever consider running for the board?" I asked. "Never," she said. "Until now?" We nodded. By the end of the month, Municipal Shield unfroze the HOA's liability policy, conditional on the completion of the stair repairs, the full audit of prior decisions, and a mandatory training seminar for all board members on fiduciary duty and safety governance. It wasn't a clean slate, but it was a usable one. Mira came with me to the first community meeting after the repairs. We stood at the back again, her arm finally out of the sling, the bruises faded to memory. Marisol opened with a statement acknowledging the board's failure and the need for structural reform. She didn't use Alden's name. She didn't have to. Then, without preamble, she pointed to a small plaque installed at the top of the new stairs. Renmore Bluffside Stairwell, rededicated for safety, accountability, and the families who stepped forward. It didn't have Mira's name, or mine, but we knew who it was for. After the meeting, a few residents came up and shook our hands. Quiet, meaningful gestures. Thank yous without the clutter of words. Back home, I locked away the case file, the photos, the letters. I didn't delete anything. But I didn't need to look at it again either. Alden never reappeared. Last I heard, he sold his house through a proxy buyer and moved 2 counties north. The HOA filed no charges, and neither did I, because I'd already done what I came to do. The stairs were fixed, the silence was broken, and no one would ever fall the same way again. Rain started just after sunset. A soft, cold mist at first, then a steadier curtain that swept over the rooftops of Renmore like a hush across a courtroom. The new stairs at the Bluffside Clubhouse gleamed under floodlights, the concrete still fresh, the handrails bolted down so tight they didn't even tremble under pressure. It was the first time in a year the structure had felt like it was actually meant to hold people. Mira stayed home. She wanted to come, but her back was acting up again, and I told her she didn't need to see the final scene. "I've already seen what happens when nothing is done," she said. "Now I want to see what it looks like when something is." She squeezed my hand and let me go. Inside the clubhouse, the chairs were arranged in a wider arc than usual, intentional, I suspected, to allow more space between residents and the board. The room was full again, not as tense as the last meeting, but not casual either, the kind of quiet you get when people know something big is about to change and don't want to miss it. I took my usual seat near the back, packet in hand, coat still damp from the walk. Marisol opened the meeting promptly at 7. Her voice carried more now, measured, steady, without the brittle hesitance it used to carry when Alden sat beside her. Daphne sat to her right, no longer tucked into herself. She had a clipboard this time, and a pen she actually used. We've completed the audit of all discretionary spending and maintenance deferrals from the past 18 months, Marisol said. All violations of board process have been documented and submitted to both the membership and our insurer. From this point forward, all repair recommendations will require at least 2 votes and a resident signature of acknowledgement before deferral. She paused. We have also established a community review committee to oversee safety infrastructure and ensure that no issue goes unaddressed again. A man 2 rows up raised his hand. And what happens to the old citations? The ones that were, let's be honest, retaliatory? We're expunging them, Daphne said, clear and firm. All violations issued under Alden's unilateral discretion are being voided. Any fines paid will be credited to the next quarterly dues. That got murmurs of approval. Marisol nodded toward the middle of the room. Corwin, would you like to speak before we adjourn? I didn't move right away. When I finally stood, it was without notes. I didn't come here to speak, I said. I came here to make sure what happened to my wife never happened to anyone else. Every eye in the room turned to me. When Mira fell, the board called it an accident. They said no hazard was present, that we had failed to take precautions. But the truth is, the hazard wasn't the stairwell. It wasn't the handrail. It wasn't even Alden. I paused. The hazard was inaction. Fear in the face of warnings. Non-response after complaints. Omission after Daphne sent her first memo. After Julia's camera caught the fall. After neighbors whispered that they were afraid to speak up. I looked around the room, letting the words settle. But silence isn't safety, and fear doesn't keep us whole. Action does. I held up the documentation one last time, then placed it on the front table. This is yours now. It's not a threat. It's a reminder. No applause followed, just quiet, heavy and solid, exactly what I wanted. Marisol cleared her throat. Before we close, the board would like to recognize the Dresner family's contribution to this community, not just for the action taken, but for the restraint shown, for choosing repair over retribution, and for reminding all of us what accountability really looks like. She reached into a small envelope and held up a copy of the dedication plaque, now framed in dark wood. Mira hadn't seen it yet. She would later, and she would cry. The meeting ended without drama. Residents filtered out slowly, nodding, murmuring. Some shook my hand. Others simply touched my shoulder in passing. Not all of them had supported me in the beginning. But that didn't matter now. Outside, the rain had eased. The air smelled like wet pavement and pine. I walked home slowly, binderless, hands in my pockets. The fight was over, and I didn't need to win it twice. 2 weeks later, the final letter arrived. It came in a plain white envelope with no HOA logo this time, just a return address from the insurer and my name printed in neat block font. Mira brought it in with the morning mail, holding it out without a word. She didn't need to ask. We both knew what it was. I opened it at the kitchen table, the sunlight cutting long lines across the floor. The first page was short. Subject, Final Determination, Renmore Bluffs, HOA Legal Exposure Review. After full investigation, including review of submitted evidence, internal communications, and board meeting transcripts, we confirm that the incident involving Mrs. Mira Dresner constitutes a covered liability event. Gross negligence was substantiated. Future coverage will remain in effect under revised board conditions. It was the word substantiated that hit hardest. For weeks it had been alleged, pending, under review. Now it was real, official, written in the language bureaucracies reserve for when they know they lost. The packet included confirmation that the HOA had met all compliance conditions, full audit complete, former board member formally removed, structure reconstruction approved by the city inspector. It even noted that the community had shown exceptional corrective action. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Mira reached over and rested her hand on mine. "No lawsuit," she said gently. "No lawsuit," I confirmed. "We don't need it anymore." She smiled, but there was something in her eyes. Relief? Yes. But also something more grounded. Closure. Later that afternoon, we walked the new stairs together. The ones she had once fallen down, now rebuilt from the foundation up. The railings were straight, the tiles flush. A small bench had been installed at the landing, facing the bluff, just before the steps dropped down. The plaque was mounted beside it now, cast in clean steel, for every step, made safer. In honor of the voices that spoke up. Mira ran her fingers over the words. "It's not just ours anymore," she said. "No," I replied. "That's the point." Behind us, kids were laughing, some kind of scavenger hunt weaving through the walking paths. Two neighbors paused to read the plaque. One touched her chest, the other nodded. There would always be scars, on Mira's shoulder, on our trust in systems, on every word Alden had tried to twist into inaction. But those scars weren't the end of the story. They were the warning signs someone else wouldn't ignore next time. We left the clubhouse hand in hand, walking the long way home through streets that finally felt livable again. Mira moved slowly, but without fear. Her pace had changed, not from the injury, from the weight she no longer carried. At home, the mailbox held a single envelope, this one from a neighbor I hadn't spoken to during the whole ordeal. Inside was a note. "Corwin, you probably don't remember, but we were the ones who got cited over the wheelchair ramp. We never fought it. We were scared. Thought no one would listen. But you did. Thank you. L and M Anderton, House Dasfresh 43. Mira read it over my shoulder and whispered, "That one stays on the fridge." I laughed. Top center. The next morning, I archived the entire case file, digitally and physically. I made backup copies, but I didn't leave them on my desk anymore. I didn't need them close at hand. Some battles don't end with courtrooms or cameras. Some end when your neighbor looks you in the eye and knows they're safe again. If you've ever been pushed, overlooked, dismissed, or watched someone you love get hurt while those in charge covered their tracks, then you already understand this story. And if you live under an HOA, subscribe now, because next time it could be your stairs, your spouse, your inaction that costs more than you can afford.